Hey, market researchers, welcome back. We are still talking about scaling techniques. We talked in the last two videos about comparative scaling techniques, so what scaling is, what measurement is, and as promised, the next chapter is on non-comparative scaling techniques. There will just be one video for this chapter. So let's talk about what non-comparative scaling techniques are. All right, and here we go. So chapter 9 again is on non-comparative scaling techniques. This is our second chapter on measurement and scaling and is our final chapter on this topic. We are going to focus in this chapter on continuous rating scales, itemized rating scales, and how we utilize and make decisions about non-comparative rating scales. All right, so in non-comparative scaling techniques, we are going to assess one item at a time. As you recall, in comparative scaling techniques, when we would give a respondent a question, we would give them two or more things to assess at a given time. So for example, we gave them 10 department stores to rank or rate or put in or some sort of order, give points to. We are comparing Macy's and Nordstrom and Kohl's and all the other department stores to each other. In this case, we might ask about each department store, but we're going to ask about them one at a time. Rate Kohl's, new question. Rate Nordstrom, new question. Rate Macy's on some criteria. All right, we are looking at not comparing, not direct comparisons, not forcing the consumer, the respondent, to make the direct comparisons. Okay. The main types of scaling in non-comparative scales are continuous rating scales and itemized rating scales. So continuous rating scales would show a consumer some kind of spectrum, a line, if you will, and then you would say place a mark on whatever position of the line. Maybe we would tell them 0 to 100, unfavorable to favorable. They would pick a spot on the line, that represents how they feel or what their opinion is about that particular brand and that criterion. So here's a couple of examples. Here we have, how would you rate Walmart as a department store? So we could say probably we're going to look at worst to best. So probably the worst to probably the best. Okay. And then we could just leave it as a line and they could pick between those two. We could add in some scaling points of 0 to 100 so that they have some points of reference. Or we could put in some additional descriptors, probably the worst and have very bad, neither good nor bad in the middle, and very good, and then probably the best. So we could do, we could utilize it in any of these ways. So for itemized rating scales, the respondent is provided with a scale that has a number or brief description associated with each category that they could select. Excuse me. Okay. The most commonly used itemized rating scales are called the Likert, the semantic differential, and the staple scales. So the Likert is the one that most people have seen. You see this on course evaluations. You see this on surveys. Maybe you go to a website and it pops up and it says, when you're done here, would you take 3 minutes of your time and complete a brief survey? Oftentimes we see Likert scales used in those cases. It's one of the most popular ways to utilize any scale of the scaling techniques. In this case, instead of asking for the consumer to rate on some continuous line, we are going to give them categories that they can choose from that range from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And they're going to pick from 1 through 5. And we might ask that, say, Walmart sells high quality merchandise. How much do you agree with this statement? Walmart has poor in-store service. How much do you agree with this statement? And then we can analyze this item by item. So looking at just high quality, looking at just high quality merchandise, looking just at that question, do some analysis. We can also create a sum score. So people's opinion assessment of Walmart altogether. And there are a variety of ways that we can calculate a summed score. A semantic differential is a 7-point scale where each end has some descriptor of that has semantic meaning. So we could say Walmart is, and then we're going to give two opposites on different criteria that we care about. Powerful on one end, weak on the other end. Reliable on one end, unreliable on the other end. Modern, old-fashioned, safe, dangerous, any types of opposite descriptors that matter to again, it still is all going back to what are we trying to accomplish? So what things would we need to know about Walmart in order to answer our research question? The negative adjective or descriptor can appear at the right or the left. It doesn't matter. Sometimes people will actually switch those up just to make in the list, just to make sure that people are paying attention as they're going through the survey, which helps to control the tendency of just going down a survey and marking the middle or marking the 4 or the 5 all the way down, and not actually paying attention to what you're supposed to be answering. So here are just some other examples. You might want to use these in your research project. So this would be a good slide to come back to when you get to that point. Okay, this is something you do need to know for the exam. I love these comparison tables, the summarizes, the differences, and what's important about each of the different types, in this case, types of scales. We see these a lot in our chapters, and so I really highly recommend studying these for the exams. Decisions that you need to make if you're creating an itemized rating scale. So this is like the Likert scale, 1 through 5, for example. You need to decide what number of categories. So a Likert scale is oftentimes 1 through 5. Sometimes it's 1 through 7. It could be 1 through 4, 1 through 6. You have to decide if you want to have that midpoint in there, if someone can select a neutral point, a 0 or a 3 on a 1 through 5 scale, or if you want to force them to have to select like a higher favorability rating or a lower favorability and not allow them a neutral point. Okay. So that's the odd or even number of categories. You need to know the forced versus, so odd or even categories, that helps us decide this next one, forced versus non-forced. That's what I was talking about. Do you want to force someone into a forced scale where they have to select something that's not in the middle? If you know that people might have neutral opinions on something, you might want to have that non-forced scale where they are able to select the midpoint. Okay. So a couple of examples, just balanced versus unbalanced. We want to have, in most cases, we want to have a balanced scale. So you can see the balanced scale has 3 goods and 3 bads. Extremely good, very good, good. Bad, very bad, extremely. So then and then you see extremely on the top, extremely on the bottom, very on the top, very on the bottom. So they're balanced, they're even. The unbalanced, here we have 4 that say good. Okay, we have somewhat good added in there. We don't have an extremely bad. So this is an unbalanced scale that is not ideal. Okay. Configurations could be a wide variety of things. I'll do there will be a video on how to utilize different software that's available for you for free in creating surveys. There's a wide variety of ways to actually display the different actual scales. So you can see here, there are 5 different ways that they're presenting the exact same scale. Some interesting ones you can do are things like a thermometer that's usually available on these free software systems. And then the faces are where we have like the happy through sad face. At the bottom here, these are very, very frequently used with children who would have a less understanding, would have a less complex understanding of the written scales that we would ask them about. So they can just point to a face. And finally, ethics in marketing research. Here, we want to make sure that we are not biasing our results by the scales that we use. We want to make sure we are establishing reliability and validity of scales using these statistical analyses. Okay. For your project, you will not need to go through the process of establishing reliability and validity, but you do need to know that in general, that is something that we would want to do if we had a longer time horizon to do so. And that is it for this chapter. This finishes our chapters on scaling, and we're going to move into more survey design. So we're just looked at the scales, the options that someone could select, and the types of questions. Now we're going to look more into different types of questions, formatting of surveys, and how all of that works. Okay, so I'm excited to talk about that in the next video. I hope you all have a fantastic and wonderful day, and I will see you soon. Thanks, everyone.